Hello, my name is Daniel Marino, and this is the Nahashi Project. So, as somebody that comes from a traditional martial arts background, and I say it that way because sometimes I don't like the term traditional, because what's typically considered, traditional martial arts usually are relatively modern, right? So, what you think of as, typical traditional karate really didn't exist as far as we can tell, before the 1900s. So, that's just the art that I come from, and karate changed significantly, right, in the modern era. But today we call it traditional, I guess, to distinguish it, from modern combat sports, really more than anything else. But anyway, but coming from what is considered a traditional martial arts background, and as somebody who's put a lot of time and effort into improving what I do to make, to take the skills that I obtained for that traditional background and then incorporate modern combatives and influences from modern combat sports to make what I do, better, make it more, and specifically because better is, a relative term, and make what I practice and what I teach, better suited for practical self-defense against criminal violence. That's what I would say is the focus of both my training and my teaching. There are two concepts that I've integrated and I've kept forward in my mind when practicing and developing my training methods that I think are key for traditional martial arts, and they're often things that are neglected by what we call traditional martial arts. So the first and the most important, in my opinion, is pressure testing, right? Everything that we practice should be applied against pressure. If it's combative, if it's a technique that's meant for fighting, the only way we're ever going to develop it to the point that we can really use it for combat, for fighting, is if you're applying it against resistance in your training. A really common thing in karate and other martial arts, but specifically karate, right, is you'll have one guy steps forward, throws a punch, and freezes in place. And then the other guy, while he's frozen in place, will do whatever. And I'm not a big fan of that training method. There's nothing wrong with doing that as one part of your training, right? But you have to take what you're doing, because there's no resistance there. You have to take what you're doing, and then you have to apply it against a partner who is resisting you. And I'm well aware of the obstacles of this in order to train safely, right? It's hard. It's not easy to introduce resistance to our training without compromising the safety of our training. But we got to ride that line, right? You need to find that middle ground. If your training is too safe, you're not practicing martial art, right? There's always going to be some risk of injury. I am not at all advocating for being reckless about it. As somebody, I teach a lot of kids, a lot of young people. I take, the threat of injuries very seriously. I take keeping the training safe very seriously. However, if I really want to provide, if I really want to be giving my students a skill set, teaching them a skill set that will enable them to defend themselves, right? There has to be, contact. There has to be resistance. There has to be a roughness to it, because that's what combat is, right? So pressure testing, very, very key, important skill, often neglected in the traditional martial arts. The second is well-roundedness. So it's my opinion, this is just coming from a karate background, but I think it's true of most arts, right? Most martial arts, when they're originally developed, have a combination of striking and grappling, right? And any martial art I can think of, it's certainly true of karate, although karate prioritizes striking and is often practiced in the modern day as almost exclusively a striking art. There's a lot of grappling that's traditionally a part of karate, and still, of course, these are all umbrella terms, a lot of different ways that karate is practiced. There's some, styles, some traditions that have kept the grappling, to this day. And then there are a lot of people like me who are trying to reintroduce it. But, you have to have the combination of striking and grappling in your training, in my opinion. Right? You have to have that for realistic combat. And I think that MMA is really great in that it demonstrates this perfectly. To be a successful MMA fighter, which in my opinion is the sport format that's closest to real fighting. There are rules in MMA, but not a lot of them, right? You have, you have to be a successful fighter in that style of competition. You have to have a combination of striking and grappling skills. Sure, a lot of fighters are going to, favor one over the other, But if you're a striker, you got to have defensive grappling skills. You have to be able to defend against the takedown. If you end up on the ground, you have to be able to defend yourself against submissions, against strikes on the ground, and have a way of getting back to your feet. If you're a grappler, of course, you start on your feet, so you have to have the ability to defend against a striker long enough so that you can close the distance, get in there, take him to the ground, and do your thing. So you have to have that well-roundedness, that combination of striking and grappling. And, things that are not relevant to sport fighting, or, things that are very relevant to self-defense, things that I'm always trying to integrate more into my training, more into my teaching as well, are the issues of multiple attackers, armed attackers, right? The difference between fighting to win, which is sport competition, and fighting for escape. These are all important concepts that are more exclusive to self-defense focused training. The legal ramifications of using force, making sure that you understand that, what's required of you legally to claim self-defense, and being prepared to make an art, being prepared to defend your actions. If you ever end up in a situation where you have to fight and you need to explain yourself to the authorities, these are all skills that are very important to self-defense, not relevant to sport fighting. But I still think that sport fighting, because it's such a requirement with competitions, right? It's like it has to work against resistance. It's got to work against somebody. It's not just letting you do it. And unfortunately, it's just a big part of what is often called traditional martial arts, is that a lot of things are done against just zero resistance. Fine to start out, fine maybe to learn the initial technique, but you need to take it and you need to apply it against a partner who is resisting you for you to develop into a skill that's really going to work for you. So these are just two things that, I've been thinking a lot about, and that I think have been real game changers. Understanding those concepts and those ideas and applying them to my practice, my training, have really been game changers for me, and I would love to see them adopted in the larger martial arts community to a greater extent than they already have, of course. A lot of very practical, very good practitioners out there, but, I think we have a long way to go, especially, I always speak from the perspective as a karate practitioner, but I think that we have a long way to go as a community to get the art to where I think it should be. But thank you very much for watching. Thank you for following the page. And in the comments, please, let me know what you think about these two concepts. Let me know about how you integrate pressure testing into your training. Let me know about how you've tried to make your training more well-rounded. If you disagree with those concepts, or you don't think those things are important, please, tell me why. And I would love to engage with you. Thanks.